Did you hear the crunch?
Oh yeah.
Sound guy heard the crunch. We don't hear from him too often. Hi, I'm Hetty Lui McKinnon and I'm at NYT Cooking Studio Kitchen, and today we are making something super springy. It's a yuzu-miso asparagus tart. It's a little bit sour, it's tart, it's sharp, but also a little bit salty and sweet from the miso, and it really kind of takes this weeknight-friendly dish to another level. This particular tart visually looks really gorgeous. It's got your asparagus spears lined up, it's got some feta on the top, it's got this element of surprise with the sauce. It's super simple because you're using puff pastry. It's store-bought. The word pastry scares people a little bit. There's this idea that you've got to make your own pastry. You know, puff pastry does the job for you. I guarantee you, if you bring that to a table, everyone is going to be really impressed. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the yuzu-miso glaze. That's got 3 ingredients, so it's super easy. Yuzu is a Japanese citrus. You don't often see the actual citrus being sold, so you can buy these. It's basically yuzu juice. You can get them from Japanese or Asian grocery stores. The way I describe it is it's kind of the best of citrus. Like, it's tart like lemon, but then it has this kind of bitter, sweet, floral notes of grapefruit, and kind of sweet like mandarins. And of course, if you cannot get yuzu juice, you can just use lemons or limes. This is just white shiro miso, and miso is quite thick, so a little whisk is a really good thing to have. This is the yuzu juice, and then this is the runny honey. To be honest, I say runny honey in the recipe because it's easier to whisk, but I'm also the type of person that just uses whatever I have in my pantry.
What's your position on bear versus
I have a position on the bear. I love the bear because I actually collect the bottles and I use them for oil. You know, the bears have different actions. So some have their hands like this, some have their hands like this. So I have one that's for the olive oil. That's, I think, is this one, and then the neutral oil is that one. So that's my position about honey bears. You can see the miso is quite thick, so you're gonna have to kind of whisk that a little bit, but eventually you're gonna get this really, I mean, this glaze has so much flavor. Miso is a fermented product, so it has like all that inbuilt flavor that's been developed over time. It's sweet, but it's also very, very savory. So we've got some puff pastry here. There is an important thing about puff pastry. It's best to thaw it in the fridge overnight. If you leave puff pastry out on the counter to thaw, it's going to get too soft. If it comes out of the fridge, it's going to be robust enough that you can work with it without sticking to your hands. And so most puff pastry that you buy from the supermarket has this kind of nice, just enough layer of like flour on it that you don't really need to over flour. If you do get your puff pastry too soft, flour your surface and add more flour just to dry it out. But this one is in pretty good shape. Put your puff pastry on a piece of parchment paper, and then we're just going to roll it out a little bit. So we're going to roll it approximately to 10 by 13. And look, it doesn't really matter if it's not a perfect square. The sides don't have to be perfectly perpendicular. I'm not really a maths person, to be honest. Look, I got that perfectly 10, at least in the middle. So I'm going to turn that around, and then I'm going to roll it so it's a bit longer into a rectangle shape. Okay, this is almost. Puff pastry is really forgiving. That's one of the things I really love about puff pastry, because it might look like super wonky like this, but once it's baked, it kind of just looks great. I love dishes that we describe as rustic, because what that means is you don't have to be perfect. That's ready. We want to score a border around the edge of the puff pastry, and that kind of creates a space that's going to fit your asparagus. We're going to do about 3/4 of an inch. If I'm at home, I'm not going to use a ruler, I'm going to be honest, but I feel like the ruler is fun, right? So it's about there. Okay. This is one of like the easy tricks you can do with puff pastry that just makes it look a little bit more special. And you don't have to score all the way through. I just kind of run the knife over the top, almost like you're drawing. I'm going to tell you about the asparagus. So Asparagus comes in all sorts of sizes, thick, really thin, like pencil thin. These are nicely, I would say, in the middle kind of asparagus. So of course you take off the woody end. So we've done the math for you, and you're going to trim them to 8.5 inches. If you're making this at home and you're not as exacting as the recipe says, that is absolutely fine. So you do you with the asparagus. So we're going to take half our crumbled feta. We're just going to scatter it inside the border. With feta, I always buy the brined feta. I do find the pre-crumbled feta a little bit too dry, and it doesn't melt as well. And now we're going to line up our asparagus. Now, I like actually lining them up so all the spears stand up like this. But people say, why don't you alternate? Then every piece of the tart, you'll get some with the flour and some with the base. If I'm going to be honest, I really love the look of this tart with all of the flowers facing the same direction. I also personally think you're not just going to have one piece of this tart. So if you really love the base, or if you really love the flowers, you can have both. Like, that's a possibility. I like the base. It's crunchy. I am a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian a really long time, but I'm not only just a vegetarian that doesn't eat meat, I'm a vegetarian that loves vegetables. So it is my natural inclination to show them at their best, to show them in their whole form. And I think that's what this tart does really well. It kind of just, it's front and center. I don't know, I can be often heard muttering to myself, look what nature gave us. Like, nature's gifts. My kids hate when I say that so much. But this has come from the ground, and look how beautiful that is. So next step is we're going to take our yuzu-miso glaze, and you're going to brush all of it. You're going to use about half of the glaze for this part, and we're going to save half for when the tart's ready. So we're going to just season the top with salt and pepper. Just a light dusting is fine. There's lots of different types of egg wash. You can do egg and water if you don't have the milk. Sometimes I do that because I don't always have milk in my fridge. But the egg and the milk gives you the most burnished look. But you can use oil too if you don't have an egg. Just some moisture, it encourages the browning of the pastry. And we're just going to brush the border. You've got some raw sesame seeds. I love the texture of sesame seeds, the fact that they turn kind of golden with the pastry, one of my favorite ingredients. And then we're going to take some olive oil and we're going to drizzle it over everything. So both the border pastry and the asparagus. So we're going to put this in a 425 degrees Fahrenheit oven. It's quite a hot oven. It's because I don't want the asparagus to cook too long. It will lose its color if it's in the oven too long. So 18 to 20 minutes. And that is one of the other joys of puff pastry. It cooks so quickly. Wow, look at that. Look at how puffed the pastry is. That's beautiful. This is what spring eating is all about. We're going to let that rest for a couple of minutes, and that just lets the asparagus kind of settle into the pastry. We're going to add some of the glaze now. Now we've got about half here. You can use all of it if you want to, but you can just use some if you don't want the yuzu-miso flavor to be too strong. So you do you, but this is just going to bring those flavors forward a little bit and kind of rehydrate the asparagus a little bit too. Lastly, it adds a beautiful kind of shine to it. And then we've got our remaining feta. And I love finishing off tarts with herbs because it just adds a little freshness. Look at that, so pretty. Look how beautiful this is. I mean, it was fairly low effort, but look at what you've got. This is such an impressive dish. Look how like green and vibrant it is. I love it. Let's taste. You can eat this pizza style if you want. I'm going to use a knife and fork. Here we go. I love how crunchy and crispy the ends are. The feta just makes it feel so alive, like so tart and sharp. Goes so well with asparagus. Are you the type of person that saves their favorite bite to the end or eats it first?
First.
Last bite.
If I didn't eat it first, my brother or sister would grab it off my plate.
I find this fascinating.
Two types of people.
Two types of people. I save the best to last. That's my last bite. You can find this recipe and many more on NYT Cooking. You gonna try some? I'm the only one eating.